Hi and welcome to yet another episode of Digital Success Exchange. We have with us today Vipul Sharma. Vipul is the founder and CEO at Checkbook, and he has over 18 years' experience with specialized expertise in product, portfolio, and business development. He has been associated with several BFSI institutions, including IndusInd Bank, Citibank, HDFC Bank, ICICI Prudential Life, to name a few. We also have with us Abhishek Rumta, founder and CEO at INT. Abhishek and Vipul will be exchanging some valuable insights on neobanks and how they are defining the future of banking. Over to you, Abhishek, but before we begin, here's a short introductory video. Thank you.
Hi, Vipul.
Hi Abhishek, how are you doing?
Good man. Thanks for taking out time for this session. I really wanted to
Sure.
do this with you because you are doing some very interesting stuff on the new banking front. And I think a lot of people want to know more about it. They want to get a better understanding of what this whole new banking ecosystem is all about.
Right, right.
So,
Yeah,
Vipul, just for the beginners, a lot of people would definitely love to understand what is the difference between a neobank, a bank, and a digital bank. I think these are a lot of new terms that are coming in nowadays, and a lot of people who are on the consumer side or even running businesses which are not tech businesses, they might be getting confused about what is the difference between these three different terminologies. Would you like to enlighten us a little bit about, how these three
sure.
things are different?
Right. So actually, the traditional bank or the bank is the number of banks that we have in India, for example, a Canara Bank, a PNB, HDFC Bank, so on and so forth, who've actually been granted licenses by the RBI, and now in the private sector, they've had about close to 20 to 30 years of growth in the Indian market. Um, Usually, it is that traditional banks will have a branch presence, and that's why you see branches, ATMs, so on and so forth. And that was the need of the hour at that time, right? When internet was still in its infancy, and you didn't have a lot of digital infrastructure getting created. Um, Neobanks are the sort of in between, in the sense on in terms of how you can provide banking through technology, right? And it was a word coined in Europe, where essentially some of these tech-enabled or tech-first um banking setup started to come, which had lesser reliance on branch setup, or usually would be completely branchless banking, and would be able to offer everything from accounts to lending, insurance, whatever it is, in different formats to their customers. Um, you then have digital banks, which is now in some countries allowed, where banks can be set up completely digitally with a license from their country's regulator without having the need for a branch ecosystem. So in India, however, digital bank licenses have still not been granted, right? And it is something that is in discussion, and definitely it should happen over the next couple of years when RBI deems it fit to do so. But that is essentially the larger differences between sort of traditional banks, neobanks, and then digital banks in today's environment. Yeah,
Right. So I understand digital bank is almost like a real bank, but it's purely digital.
yeah, yeah. And I think
And
in some
India still
countries
don't.
you do have.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And India still don't have that. We don't yet have licenses for digital banks yet.
Yes, we don't. Right. So we do have something called a payments bank, But again, those have piggybacking on infrastructure. For example, you have Airtel Payments Bank, which piggybacks on the infrastructure that Airtel has on its own. But you don't have pure play digital banks which have been regulated by RBI yet. There are white papers on it in terms of what it could be like and so on and so forth. There are discussions, but it will come up over the next couple of years, hopefully.
Sure. So, like, what can a traditional bank do that a neobank cannot do? Is there any specific restriction, or you can do almost everything?
I think the what's happening in India, for example, there's a lot of synergies between traditional banks and neobanks. So one of the things that does happen is that you don't, for example, a neobank is not now, for example, us don't compete with the banking ecosystem, but we work with the banking ecosystem to, for example, go after segments that are traditionally the bank has not gone after or can't go after because it requires a digital nimbleness, which at times becomes difficult for traditional banks to do. So there is a lot of work that we do with the banks in India, and usually we'll work together in providing services and products to customers. The advantage that we have is that we usually, neobanks will usually be segment specific. So either they'll go, they'll build something for millennials or digital natives or salaried customers, or like in our case for small business owners. So we're then able to focus all our energies on that one segment, understand the problems they're facing, and actually solve them. So that leads to obviously better customer delight. But at the same time, we are working with the banks in terms of having the infrastructure, the capital, right? All of that stuff comes from the bank. But the technology, the product creation, and so on and so forth happens, at our end, right? So that's how these two worlds are sort of working together today.
Excellent. So you basically solve the product design and distribution for them, and they provide the actual, if I can use the word, manufacturing of the product, and they manage the back end and the legal and the finance part of it. When I say finance, it means the big deposits that they have to keep. So they manage that part, and you kind of bring the innovation and distribution on the front. Is this a decent,
Yeah,
understanding?
that's a good way of looking at it, right? And I think the other thing that we also bring for the traditional banks is that we also bring a certain focus on a particular segment, right? So that's where the product innovation comes from. And usually neobanks will cater to a specific segment, and the teams will have specific expertise in knowing what that segment wants and creating product design. So I think that's where the benefit comes in. Of course, we also bring the distribution because you are creating something which the segment needs. You're also effectively also able to bring that customer. There's a lot of product market fit which happens far better in that fashion rather than having a universal bank which has all the different products which may not be very differentiated from each other. Yeah.
So Vipul, tell me, like, how is Checkbook serving clients differently and better? Being a neobank, a technology-enabled neobank, compared to many other banks where small businesses might be going. Consider it your opportunity to do a plug.
Yeah, no, I think look, this ecosystem that I service of small business owners are usually sole proprietorships, right? And they have a turnover under 40 lakhs. So these are typically your kirana store owners, hardware stores, chemist shops, small restaurants, stuff like that, largely traders. It's a very big community. It's about close to 6 to 7 crore customers today in the country.
Wow.
Almost the size of the salaried customer. I mean, just kirana stores alone, just shops alone, you see them everywhere, right? So they're of course there. Now, however, the reality is that they've been underserved substantially. So, for example, most of my customers will have accounts with cooperative banks, where they may not have digital banking at all. they'll still have to go to the branch, to get basic services, like even to deposit a check or to do fund transfers or get a statement, right? So I think those are some of the issues, and really for this customer, going away from his shop to a branch to do banking activities means loss of business, right? Because he doesn't have, 98% of small businesses in India will employ less than 4 people. So that's another, reality. So time spent in doing banking is actually business lost for them. So,
Right.
so and of course the banking industry overall has been servicing the salaried segment, corporates, mid market, MNC, government business really well. And there's of course a lot more to do there in India in any case. So this has become sort of like a blue ocean of opportunity. There are very few players who are really wanting to do something with this segment, and that's what we like about it, which is that this segment is somebody for whom digital banking, or great banking services, uh, access to lending, access to insurance is sort of business critical for them, because if they have the right amount of credit, they're insured, they can actually save a lot of money, and that helps them obviously expand their business as well. So from that point of view, there's a lot of fit in terms of providing them right services. And at the same time, we also feel that we want to make sure that we provide them what they need. And what they usually need is digital accounts, lending of two types, working capital lending so that they can buy from wholesalers, buy from distributors, and we service that, which is essentially embedded finance, right, where we work with wholesalers and so on and so forth. And then we also provide them business loans so that they can actually expand their businesses, get into ancillary business, so on. And we have an insurance subsidiary which provides, insurance to them. So we have a composite broking license, and through that we're able to provide insurance to these customers. What we found is that uh, on the insurance side, for example, that customers don't have insurance for their shop, which is very basic. They don't have insurance for their life, right? And we've seen it in COVID. We had situations where there's some customers who lost their lives during COVID, and because of that, their entire livelihood and their families suffered a lot. But there were other customers who had insurance, and because of that, even though there was such a tragedy, the families were able to continue the business because they didn't have to sell it off, right, to pay dues and so on and so forth. So I think there's a lot of those products and services that we're able to provide in a one consolidated app, right, which is a checkbook app, and which makes life far easier for them. They can get their account sorted, their lending sorted, their insurance sorted. I call it the three engines of growth for us, and the three engines of growth for the customer as well. And I think that's what differentiates us and allows us to be relevant for this customer segment.
Excellent. So basically, what I understand is it's about simplifying their overall banking, because obviously they don't need all the things that a large bank offers or a traditional bank offers. Second, what I understand is that you are trying to give them those services which generally they do not get from larger banks, because they might be very small client for a larger bank, and for them the cost to service them might be very high. Where you are using digital means to basically service them much better and faster. So this basically creates a competitive edge for you to serve them better and faster, and that is why they come to you. Is this a
Yeah,
fair?
so I think the second point is even really the more important point, which is that they just don't get access to it, right?
Yeah.
Which is that I mean, imagine a Kirana store owner walking into an MNC bank branch. He will probably not get attention from
Yeah.
anybody in the branch, right? So just giving them that self assurance that, look, here is checkbook which can do all those things that probably was a big mountain for you to climb, because you have to go to a branch, get your accounts open. Getting lending is next to impossible for a bulk of this customer segment. And insurance is something that usually gets sold to them as a savings product when it should actually be a protection product. uh, for them to be able to see that here is an app where I can just go ahead and very fast get access to all of this, and that too in the language of their choice. Our app is available in 7 languages, so it makes
Wow.
them even more comfortable. to be able to see it in their own languages. Your Kannada, Telugu, Hindi, Marathi, Gujarati, all of that is covered. That gives them, uh, well, the feeling that they are not being ignored. That is one.
Of
And the
course.
second, that they are also being treated very respectfully, because I mean, we saw this during COVID, right? The small business owners in the country were treated as heroes, especially Kirana ecosystem, right? Kirana owners, and they are big heroes for their families and for the community they support. So I think we just want to make sure we give that same respect back to them and put the control in their hands in terms of what they need, and go ahead and access it, right? Yeah.
So, Vipul, how quickly you are able to judge the credit worthiness of this whole audience? Because everybody is after giving them credit now. The Kirana tech has become a new buzzword. So everybody is trying to find some way to serve them and then offer credit to them. So a lot depends upon how quickly you are able to, create your model to decide the credit worthiness of the users and start offering them credit in easy way. So how quickly you are
Right.
able to do it? Let's say I am a Kirana store. If I come on board, how quickly are you able to offer me credit?
Yeah, so usually same day, right?
Okay.
It obviously depends on the type of credit. So if you're taking a 2.5 3 lakh loan, which is usually what we do on the business loan side, it'll take us about a day or two, right? And in that, you again, everything is digital. We don't have documents getting couriered or stuff like that. We use APIs to verify KYC, and we obviously take digital bank statements of the customer if he's wherever he's operating his bank account from. So I can actually, and then we underwrite basis cash flows and not basis some surrogate uh, information, right? So that gives us a good representation of how well his business is doing, and we use technology as much as we can, with the right balance of not going overboard with it, because it's still a financial services product, and we're still so we want to make sure that, for example, we recently moved to starting to do video personal discussions with customers. So we would actually instead of having, which is a traditional model, banks will usually send a credit manager to a customer to do a personal discussion and so on and so forth. That becomes a non-scalable approach, right? Because
Right.
there are only so many visits a person can do. There's traffic, there's all of those things. So what we do is we actually do a video PD. It's all recorded. All the information that we want to do is captured. It's digital. It's database driven. So we can then analyze it as we go along. So that allows us to capture a lot of information from the customer, and that allows us obviously to take better decision and faster decision, because it's all digital.
So, in this what I call the Kirana tech landscape, right? Do you see companies like Khata Book and Udan as competition to you, or you see cooperation there? How do you see that?
Look, I mean, it's difficult for me to comment on individual companies as to
No, no worries. I mean, I'm just talking about other stakeholders
how.
in the ecosystem.
Yeah, yeah. No, I look. I think the entire, there is of course the Kirana tech ecosystem which is there, which basically looks at uh, bookkeeping, bunch of other things. So in our app, for example, we also have something called Checkbook Khata, which is like the
Okay.
product that Khata Book had, right? But one of the things we've realized at Checkbook is that a lot of that is user generated content, so we don't give it any credit. I mean, we don't take any credit decisions based on that.
Okay.
But it is there as a free service. If somebody wants to use it as bookkeeping, they can. Um, we do work with people like Metro Cash and Carry. We do work with people like Shop Kirana, where we obviously work with them to, because they have ecosystem of customers that we service. And similarly, obviously Udan and everybody else is in the same business. So us working with people who are catering to the customers that we work with or we service is obviously a no-brainer. And for us, partnerships are extremely important.
Sure. So why do you see this like now? I mean, just trying to understand now more on the neo banking side, but I think we have understood very well about the checkbook side. Now getting to the neo banking side, why do you think these companies are growing at astronomical pace? Like all these new neo banks that are coming, like in months and weeks, like they are having thousands and thousands of customers. What's fueling this growth?
So I think one is that, the like on the savings side, right, or on the salaried side, you have a bunch of neobanks. What they managed to do is digitize the experience so that it is very fast. I think whenever, and in our case as well, that's one of the things we do, which is that if you can get the customer from product discovery to product in his hand fast enough, which means that you understand, minimize steps, focus on UI UX technology, without compromising on regulatory checks or KYC checks and so on and so forth, uh, customers will love that product, because the alternative is go to a bank, go to a branch, talk to people, and I think, like I was talking about, our customer segment, right? They don't want to because it's loss of business for them. So we can give that. So that's the answer for astronomical growth. You're able to give the segment the right product, which takes very less time to onboard, and it has the right delight in it. People will latch onto it, just like people latched on to 10 minutes groceries. I mean, nobody knew, anybody knew needed it, but then everybody's using it, right?
Absolutely. So it's more like what you are saying is it's more product led growth because the product is the right fit and people love it. And if they love it, they talk about it. And therefore, it is growing at a astronomical pace. So would you say the cost of
Absolutely.
customer acquisition is not as high as, other businesses like, the e-commerce businesses? Do you see that that is comparatively that is lower than that, the cost of customer acquisition?
Yeah, so I mean, I can't comment on other people's cost of acquisition, but in our case, for example, we have, we're unit economics positive, right? And
Wonderful.
we have an LTV to CAC of more than 4 right now, which is realized.
Wonderful.
And I think the reason why that is there is because obviously customers like the product, so that is one thing. The fact that we can get it into their hands fast enough is the other thing. The third
Mhm.
thing is, of course, in our case, we also are a multi-product company, so we do make revenues and have been making revenues from day one on things like lending and insurance. And in banking, that's where you do make revenues. So I think those are the ways that you sort of bring down your general cost and so on and so forth. Um, but obviously, when you're scaling at a very fast pace, and you could maybe have a little higher cost, but then in financial services, your as long as your LTV to CAC is under control, I think you're sorted out. And in our case, we actually look at realized and not over a period of time, right? So I think that's how we see it.
That's a great conservative approach. And I'm sure this comes from your decades of experience in banking to stay conservative, of course, while you are still using technology to grow very, very fast.
Yeah, I mean, look, we've been growing 20% month on month, which is substantial growth,
That's crazy.
and that's true for a lot of other people as well. Uh, and I think being digital obviously helps, right? So while we work with partnerships, so we are able to unlock a lot of channels because we are digital, and we don't have to sort of rely on putting brick and mortar in place and branches and so on and so forth.
So, what do you think, Vipul, are the critical success factors for neobanks? Like, I'm sure there are lots of neobanks which are already there, and hundreds more will open over next few years, right? Some will succeed, many will not. What would be the critical success factors for a neobank to be successful?
Right. So I think one was, obviously choosing the right segment,
Okay.
right, and understanding the gap. So, uh, and the gap could be, it could be time value. Something takes too long, so you're solving for that. It could be price. Something is too expensive, you solve for that. So I think making sure that you understand that and then go after the right segment is extremely important, right? The other thing is also ensuring that you understand what's the competitive landscape and who else is going to be able to do that way better. Like, I mean, for example, on this on somebody's working at Infosys, right, or working at Unilever, right? There very less chance that I can provide that customer, a loan cheaper than, let's say, an HDFC bank can, right? Because of the sheer cost of fund advantage they have, because of their balance sheet and so on and so forth. So I think just making sure what is the right product, and I think there, things like wealth, on the saving side, how do you manage, for example, mutual funds and so on and so forth. I think that becomes interesting. Uh, so I think choosing the right product market fit, what is the right segment, and then of course making sure that you understand competition really well, so that you understand that you will be able to service this customer long enough in a sustainable manner as you scale, becomes a very important parameter. So I think these are some things that you should keep in mind.
Sure. And Vipul, like, of course, besides checkbook where you are putting your blood and sweat, which are the other innovations that you see which excites you in the fintech space overall? Like, what makes you really say, wow?
Well, I think everybody knows about the UPI story, right? So I mean, this is the talk of the world. People who literally, I mean, it is magical for somebody who comes from the US or
Yeah,
Europe. Nothing like
I
this
know.
even exists over
Yeah.
there. So that, of course, is a brilliant project, very ahead of its time, and very well conceived and executed. I think the ONDC project and some of the stuff on Gem Sahai is also very exciting as we go along, right? The government marketplace is something which is very large in scope and already has some. So that's something that is I'm excited about. ONDC, again, very excited about, because of the fact that it democratizes ability of many of the small business owners that I cater to be able to participate on a digital marketplace. That's another project, I think, which I'm extremely excited to see how it sort of plays out. Right. So I think, yeah, some of these, and then of course the on the digital infrastructure side, I think there's been um, companies like Kazza, for example, right, who sort of digitize KYC to a large extent, and there are quite a few of them. SignZ is there, a bunch of other guys are there. Again, has simplified the ability for everybody in the ecosystem, banks, insurance companies, fintechs, right, mutual funds, to be able to do KYC far, far better. And I think those are, again, very interesting setups that sort of flourished over the last couple of years.
Excellent. So, do you also foresee, digital banks going beyond banking and also entering into areas like e-commerce and allied areas like where they are actually also become SaaS companies? Because what they are doing is basically adding very deep value to a given segment of people, and that value can happen in multiple ways. Obviously, one is banking, but very very related way is giving them marketplace or access to market or access to customers, or even, as I said, SaaS software to run their businesses more efficiently and effectively. I mean, you are trying to do a part of it when you say that you have given them checkbook khata. So, do you see that this trend is going to grow, and is this a possibility that these companies will get into these new revenue streams in years to come?
Yeah, I definitely do. And in fact, there are companies which are, yeah, providing services to small startups like us. We are an MSME, actually, in the definition. Uh, and there are a lot of companies which provide, account reconciliation, GST reconciliation, stuff like that, right? We work with Razorpay, for example. They are our payment gateway for some of the products that we use, and we also use some of other products of Razorpay as well. So definitely there will be SaaS opportunities in the startup ecosystem, in the SME ecosystem, right? And that's definitely an opportunity. And I think again, as is traditionally been in India, you've had sort of some of these SaaS companies partnering with banks and then doing a combined go to market, right, to their customers. And that has, I think, worked really well, because then the banks offering also becomes better. The SaaS company is able to get access to customers. So I think that's a win-win.
Excellent. So, one question that always keeps coming to my mind is, as a neobank, you always have an upstream bank, which is a traditional bank, right? Doesn't that kill your competitive advantage in long term? Because all the customers that you bring on your platform, by default, becomes a customer on the bank's platform as well, in a way, right? So you don't have exclusive access to these customers and these accounts. So someone else can barge into
Yeah.
that. I mean, if I be on your side, that would be one of my concerns in my mind. Ki, what happens if that bank takes away those customers tomorrow when they decide to do something like that by just adding a layer of technology on top of their business, right? So how do you deal with that, and what
Yeah.
is the real risk here?
So I think one of the answers I gave is that banks have had 50 years to do that. Uh, right? Go after this customer segment, do whatever they wanted to do. And they haven't. And one part of that is because, it's not as if there hasn't been growth. Banks have grown really well and have given excellent returns to their shareholders and have done a great job. But I think the sheer size of the ecosystem is such that you do need more players and more companies to come in into the space. I think the other thing is that, for example, in our case, or in some of the other cases as well, you have different people sort of doing different services. So for example, accounts are with a couple of banks. Our lending is with somebody else. Insurance is a broking entity of our own. So it's again with insurance companies. So a lot of the aggregate data on that customer usually rests with me, and not directly with the banks.
Okay. So,
So that also makes a difference. Yeah.
so you see that eventually you feel that this partnership has got equal weightage on both sides. So this should not become a situation where it's a win-loss game eventually in long term. But you think it will continue to be a win-win partnership?
Well, I mean, look, I think it's like this. If there's a partnership which is working really well, then it is in the interest of both parties to make sure that they both grow sustainably. Otherwise, both of them will lose in some form or the other. If let's say you're growing at 20% month on month, and one party or the bank or the neobank, whatever, wants to get out of that partnership, they also have to then have alternatives that give them that growth. I'd rather focus on bringing more partners than saying I want to replace a partner, right? Which doesn't make sense anyway in the long term. So there is a lot of cooperative work that is going on within the
Right.
banking ecosystem, and I like that situation. It's also because a lot of us, are from the banking industry. A lot of people from the banking industry will, maybe start something of their own at some point of time. So there's a lot of learning either way, right? On this, and as long as the customer base is growing for both entities and they are all, benefiting from it, it is not really in anybody's favor to really switch off something. I'd rather add more, in my opinion.
Yeah. No. And just curious, are you allowed to have multiple sponsor banks at the back end, or you have to work with one only?
So, I think there's a debate on that which is ongoing, right? So, some situations you can, some situations you can't.
Okay.
Uh, Secondly, in our case, we actually have different kind of products. So, for example, insurance is something that we do as a broker. So that is obviously with insurance companies. So we work with SDFC Ergo, we work with Kotak Life, and so on and so forth directly, because we are an IRD registered broker. So that's different. Then on the lending side, we work with NBFCs and banks as well, different banks, and then on the current account side, we work with different banks as well. So there really isn't anything that I'm just working with one single bank. We have over 30 partners between various
Wow.
financial services. Yeah,
So yeah, it's kind of
yeah,
a very nice integration of different services in one place, which gives them best of all the things in the world in one place, so that and then which is
yeah. I
customized to
mean,
them.
right, yeah. It's customer first, right? So whatever way in which we can provide the best services is the route that we will take to make sure we do it.
Okay.
If I could
So Vipul,
provide it with just one entity, I would love to do it if it makes economic sense.
sure.
To do it and simplifies life for our customers, we'll do it, right?
Make,
So the whole perspective is not about I mean, especially in a startup technology ecosystem, I think it's always customer first and second about what is. So we are willing to do the hard work to get all these pieces together, so that for the customer it is just one interface, one ecosystem, one app that he has to use.
Sure, Vipul. We have 7, 8 minutes more to go, and I have got loads of
Sure.
questions while we were chatting. Between
Right.
ourselves, a lot of questions have popped up. So I'll put up few of them to you, and
Right.
would love to get your views on them. Uh, so what are the biggest challenges that neobanks are facing today? I mean, at the industry level, what do you think are the biggest challenges they face?
So I think the sometimes what happens is that when neobanks talk to banks or lending companies or NBFCs or mutual funds, or insurance companies and so on and so forth, uh, at least some time back, there was a hesitation from the traditional ecosystem about, okay, will this work? Will it not work? The product that you're thinking of, is it something, can is it really going to sell? Do customers really want it? Right. And some of that is because the neobanks or would come up with insight based on their experiences or their interaction with the community they're serving. Um, and it wouldn't be very obvious at first. And that's how it works with the entire technology startup ecosystem. Most of the things are not very obvious needs at first, but then they pick on really well because they are exactly the thing that customers wanted. So I think just doing that aspect and saying, hey, look, there is a pot of gold with respect to what the customer needs and what we want, and we can make money on this, etc. Sometimes becomes a challenge. So I think that is every innovative product goes through that cycle. And I think because financial services are very regulated, you have to make sure that you do it properly, right? So I think that is one challenge which is there, 100%.
Thanks. And one question that has come in from one of the audience, very interesting. What do you think about the high interest rate on deposits in neobanks? I mean, how are neobanks able to offer better interest rates than many traditional banks? What's the trick there?
No, I think on the saving side, uh, the banks which whoever is on the saving side neobank. I mean, we are not a saving side neobank. We offer current accounts to our customers where there are no interest rates, regulatory wise. But on the saving side, the banks are basically setting the interest rates, and then they are allowing the neobanks to give those same interest rates. So that's how it works. I don't. There aren't any situations where neobanks are setting their own interest rates. There's the interest rates that the banks can give.
Okay. And how do you provide security, in all the transactions? Like, is there anything special that you have to do to offer the secure transactions through the banking neo banking platforms that you build, or is it taken care by the upstream bank that you are dealing with?
No, I think obviously security is a primary factor, right? And of course, banks have their own protocols that we have to obviously adhere to, right? And and then of course we have high levels of encryption across the board to make sure that APIs are and passing encrypted information if they are with the bank systems and so on and so forth. And of course, we minimize the data footprint at our end, right? So all of those help in making sure that we provide a safe and secure transaction.
Right.
Of
And
course,
we have a very
technology has come a long way as well, right, Abhishek?
course,
So
yes,
there is a lot of technology that does play a role in making sure everything is secure, compartmentalized, and encrypted.
of course. And we have a very excited audience who is asking, do you believe that neobank will be replaced with traditional banking?
Okay.
Or I think he wanted to ask, will
Yes.
traditional banking be replaced with neo banking?
Right. So I think, look, net from a customer point of view, right? Improvement in service, reducing time to get the product, and having delight in the experience is going to benefit them in any case, right? So
Mhm.
whatever we are doing will help the ecosystem, will help customers. Will it replace? I mean, this is a cycle that has continued. I mean, there was, for example, in India there were PSU banks, right? And then they were continuing to grow, and then you had private sector banks licenses, which were 80s, 90s. They started getting private sector banks. That's when HDFC Bank was formed, for example, ICICI, and so on and so forth, as a retail banking units. And then they've grown over the last 20, 30 years. And I believe that it's a 30-year sort of cyclical wave, where
Yeah.
you have a technology change, a paradigm shift in customer expectations, which bubble up into this format. And I think we're seeing that change now with neobanks basically saying, okay, look, all the traditional banks have obviously scaled, and in that period even PSU banks have scaled. So I think the neobanks will come in. There's a large ecosystem. India's per capita income is slated to go to $4,000, per person per year, per month, from in the next 2 years, right? And I think that's going to change consumption levels substantially, and we will demand a lot more from the banking ecosystem than we ever did. Our GDP to debt ratio is one of the lowest in the large economies. So all those are going to be important. So I don't think it's going to replace. I think it's going to add substantially, and it's going to make everybody better. Look at the PSU banks, right? They have also changed a lot. I mean, the Yono SBI's Yono app is a
Yeah.
tremendous example of digital change in a PSU bank, and is really right at the front in terms of the kind of products and services they will provide on an app. So
Absolutely.
everybody gets better. Yeah, that's a great thing.
Yeah. And I mean, one gentleman, Akhil, is asking, what is the delinquency percentage of loan products that you see in this as
Sure.
a neobank?
Right. So we've actually been fortunate that way. So we actually have an NPA or 90 plus, which is sort of sub 1%.
Wow.
And that's been yeah. I mean, our provisions are higher because we knew that we are lending to a segment, and we started lending only last year. So, but we've been growing at 20% month on month, and I think that is a good thing. But I expect this to be more in the 2 to 3% range. That's usually the industry standard for this segment, which is the right stable number that it will probably settle at.
So Shubhajit is asking that, traditional banks, of course, will have, you can walk in and you can talk to those people, but in neobank, it's all digital, right? So what are the ways you are providing the support channels to your consumers, and what's working and what's not working there?
Right. Right. So I think in support, we obviously have our own contact center. So we have an inbound number, and so on and so forth. A lot of people get in touch with us on social media as well. You know, so that's another thing. They can also email us as well, and we also obviously also have chat. So WhatsApp is another channel where we are able to communicate with customers. But I'm working on a project where we can have reverse communications, where customers can start a chat with us. Um, and and I think we want to get to a point where a lot of this support issues can get self-solved within the app itself, uh, which I think the gold standard really is Amazon. Where
Of
90%
course.
of it gets sorted on self-serve within the app itself. So I think that's one way of making sure that we are engaging well. But I think in our community, right, the customer is not a digital native, um, because he's using UPI and stuff like that, but he still wants a little bit of touch and feel. So we've seen a lot of times that it's usually better when we talk to the customer or the customer talks to us. That is a good channel, and we don't want to force a channel on a customer, right? It shouldn't be that, oh, I have to, I मेरे को समझ में नहीं आ रहा how to navigate. that doesn't help at all. That becomes another support issue that I couldn't understand your support issue. I couldn't understand your support channel. So we want to
Yeah.
be relevant and make sure we talk the customer's language. And a lot of times in our case, we like we've seen that customers like to get in touch with us over phone. That's the easiest thing.
So I think once the recent changes in WhatsApp policy in terms of APIs and all, I think that should help you build more interesting customer servicing channel, because
Yeah,
people understand WhatsApp. Everybody understands WhatsApp, right?
everybody
Somehow.
understands WhatsApp. Yeah,
So,
absolutely. Yeah.
yeah. So Hardeep is asking, will you be going or planning to use blockchain technology for your product anytime soon?
Uh, well, uh, I mean, see, this is usually a transaction which is happening in financial services, usually happening within an ecosystem of other financial services companies, right? So, interbank transactions, for example. So, they are already, you know, pretty much annotated and have all the right information about where they originated, came, and went, right? So, from that point of view, not really. And then we also use a lot of bureau on the credit information, which, if you think about it, is kind of like blockchain, right? Because it has a sort of a complete history and a footprint of a customer, and it is now digital data. So yeah, not really anytime soon. I think it makes a lot of relevance in sort of some informal plus formal ecosystems, like shipping containers, bank
That's right.
transaction, that kind of stuff. There
Yeah.
makes a lot more sense, but not here.
So Vipul, final question, and this time it is from me, putting myself in the audience shoes. So in 10 years from now, Vipul, what do you see the future of successful neobanks? I'm sure a lot of them will not be able to make the cut, but the ones who will be able to make the cut, do you see them eventually in 10 years from now become digital banks, or will they become payments banks, or will they remain a fintech company like a neobank? Uh, how do you see these companies evolve eventually? What are the future pathways for them?
Right. I think the best scenario would be that multiple pathways are available for companies to decide for themselves based on what works well. So if there are, cooperative ecosystems that get created between a bank and a neobank, and that is a ecosystem that's working well, and they feel that it's best not to disturb it, then go ahead and create those partnerships and continue working like that. I do feel that some form of digital bank regulation should come in India. Is there in a few other countries, and I think that will open up pathways for actually getting a regulated license, which is something, for example, something that we would prefer, right? Because I worked in the banking industry all my life, and I think RBI is one of the best regulators globally,
Of course.
and therefore it makes a lot of sense to come under that ambit. I said this at another conference. I think the regulator is appointed by us, right, as citizens of the country, to protect us. So therefore, it is in our benefit, in our favor, to make sure there is adequate regulation. So we are in favor of that. And I think that's where it will go. But I really feel there will be multiple pathways available for companies as they go along.
Wonderful, Vipul. I think I can keep going on. This is a subject which is very close to my heart, and of course, this is your bread and butter. So you can also keep going on.
Right. Of
We
course.
have to, we have to bring down the curtains on today's small show. Thank you so much, Vipul, for being part of this. Uh,
Sure. Thanks. Yeah. Yeah. No,
yeah,
I loved the conversation. I think good questions as well from the audience. Great to have a chat, Abhishek. Thanks for your time. Yeah.
thank you, audience. You have been a
Thank you.
wonderful audience. Some very interesting questions. And back to you, Ashmita.